Thank you, David. Welcome, everyone. Good evening to the Bollington Town Assembly 2021. My name's John Stewart. I'm the Town Mayor. Just a few protocols I'd like to share with you this evening before we start. I'd like to just let you know that we are going to have the microphones switched off, and then the speakers will obviously have the microphones on. We're also going to ask you to switch off your cameras when people are speaking, so that the presenters can actually, there's no distraction, that you can see the screen and then see who's speaking. If you have any questions throughout the session, if you could put them in the chat box, and then at the end we will refer those questions to the appropriate town councillor, who can give you an answer. If we can't answer them, obviously we'll take them away and you'll get a prompt answer in the next few days. There were 3 questions asked for on email earlier. They're going to be answered at the end as well. We'll take those 3 first, and we've got answers for those 3. So I do appreciate the people who've written in with their questions in advance. Thank you for that. Okay, let's kick off. So first of all, I think I'd like to go to the next slide. Yes, just to let you know, when you write your question in the chat box, when we come to that question, if the person who's written the question in the chat box could read those out, please. That's how we wanted to do it. Thank you. So 2020, what a year it's been. I personally have been very privileged to represent the community during this challenging year. I think, for me at least, the pandemic has brought out the best in the people in Bollington. It's been very humbling to see the people in our community coming together and supporting each other through a very challenging time for everybody. Been a lot of kindness and compassion in the community, and that's been fantastic to see. I really do think that it has brought out the best of the people in Bollington. The next slide, please, David. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank people in the community. That's really been one of my main aims this year. We set up a volunteer group early on in the pandemic to support those who were vulnerable, those who needed to self-isolate at home. And we set up a network of volunteers throughout the town who have actually helped greatly in keeping people's spirits up, getting prescriptions, doing shopping, and whatever. And that's been a real success. And I'd just like to thank those volunteers for doing that. And it's been really fantastic to see that happen. I'd also obviously like to thank those who work in NHS, the emergency services, who've supported us through thick and thin. We have several care homes in Bollington, and the care home staff have been fantastic, and particularly the home carers, the family members who look after those who are vulnerable and those who need support. Our council workers have carried on throughout, looking after our public spaces. The refuse collection services haven't missed a beat. The teachers and the parents who've worked hard to educate our children throughout this time, been very difficult, and it's been great to see the children going back yesterday, and hopefully that this time we'll make it stick. But you know, we mustn't underestimate the teachers particularly have been working hard throughout the year. The schools have actually been open for looking after the children who are from key workers, and you know, they've done a fantastic job. I know myself, I've got a couple of boys at school, and it's been really fantastic the support they've received. The local businesses as well have adapted fantastically to provide us with their services throughout, depending of course on the lockdown rules at the time. But we've had some fantastic service from our community in the shops, the takeaways that we've had when the pubs have been open, the restaurants, and everybody's really done their part. I'd like to make a special mention to the town council, especially the town hall team, who've been, it's been difficult, as it has for everybody, working in isolation, working from home when normally they'd be working together in the town hall itself. So I'd like to thank that team very much for supporting me, the town council, and the community at large. The next slide, please. I think it's only fitting that I should make a special mention to thank our town clerk. David Naylor has announced his retirement at the end of April. He served the community of Bollington for over 10 years. And during that time, there have been many positive things that have happened. Bollington Youth Project, for example, gaining our assets at the town hall, the civic hall, a lot of work around looking after the land in Bollington and various projects throughout his tenure. He should be very proud of what he's achieved and supported the council through thick and thin. So I'd personally like to thank David for his wise counsel whilst I've been mayor this year. He's helped keep me on the straight and narrow. I think if we remember when David was recruited into the council, Councillor Angela Williams was the town mayor, and she and the town council appointed David to this key role, and it's been a fantastic appointment. We're now looking for a new town clerk, and hopefully we can find somebody half as good as David to fill his shoes. So on behalf of the Bollington Town Council, David, I'd like to thank you for your long and distinguished service. Thank you very much. So what have we achieved in this difficult year? Well, we helped set up the Bollington Community Support Volunteer Group, which I mentioned before. I think it's notable that the Christmas events, it was very difficult this year. Obviously, we couldn't convene more than a couple of people. So what we did, we put up a series of Christmas events, and that was led by Councillor Sarah and various members of the community. I think we all agree it was a great success. One of the most notable things that have been done this year is to set up the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion, the EDI working group. This was set up with some council members and obviously members of the community, and that's been a great success. And you'll be hearing more about that next year when we've moved that along. But we're very proud of that being set up this year, and I'm looking forward to some great things coming out of that in the years to come. We recognise people in the community who've done so much to make Bollington such a great place. That's been one of my favourite tasks this year. It's always great to recognise people who really contribute to our community, and there are many who do on a day-to-day basis. It's also notable that we're one of the first town councils in the UK to conduct council business online. We started in March, and we haven't missed a meeting throughout the pandemic. We also did the Mayor Making and the Civic Sunday online, and they were all very, very successful. So we're very proud of the fact that we didn't miss one meeting all year due to the pandemic. It's also notable to say that over the last 5 years, we haven't increased the precept in Bollington. We manage the council's finances effectively. We've really attempted this year to really tighten our belts. So next year we don't increase the precept, and we ensure that we can deliver the services we deliver without doing that. So we're looking forward to another successful year next year financially, and then we'll see how we go once the pandemic is behind us. I think it's also important to note that the climate emergency is foremost in our decision making now, right throughout the council, through all the committees. The climate emergency is a real issue, as we know, and we're going to make the most of how we can contribute positively to that in all the decisions we take in council. One of the things also we're very pleased to announce is that the extension of the Bollington Cross Conservation Area, which is now going to include Lower House. This is a really fabulous thing to happen, because it means that the Lower House area will now be part of the conservation area, which means it's under more strict rules, and hopefully will protect that area for years to come. Thank you, David. So now I'd like to hand over to Councillor Rowland, who's going to talk about Bollington 2030.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Well, Bollington 2030 is one of several community projects which have been launched over the past 18 months. But what is it? Well, it was born out of our declaration of a climate emergency in June 2019, and the desire not to be like so many other councils which declare an emergency but do little. It's not about climate change. It's about much, much more. Discussions that I had with our councillors, the resident grassroots group Transition Bollington and Friends of the Earth really pointed out that to concentrate solely on carbon reduction is to miss the point. What is required is a community-led vision for a future Bollington. So in addition to countering the threats of climate change, the demographics of Bollington are changing, as we'll certainly find out from the census. Young families with aspirations and expectations for their present and future are moving here because it's a healthy and attractive place to live. We need to identify, understand and meet those aspirations. So Bollington 2030 is about taking actions now to reduce the impact of future threats and make Bollington an even better place to live. It is a collaboration between the Town Council, Transition Bollington and Friends of the Earth, and is an holistic approach to enhancing community resilience. There will be emerging threats to our community. These could range from flooding due to climate change to another pandemic, be it human or animal, and we need to reduce those risks now before those threats arrive. But we also need to make Bollington more self-sufficient, enhance our natural beauty by careful management of, for instance, tourism, help grow more local industries, and become an even more caring society. So our first aim was to produce a strategic action plan, which I'll discuss shortly, and the second was to embark upon an extensive community engagement programme. Could I have the next slide, please, David? Thank you. So what has Bollington 2030 achieved so far? What are our plans and how can you help? Well, you've heard we have declared a climate emergency, and we have been actively supporting Transition Bollington and Friends of the Earth in their work for our community. This includes, for example, funding the purchase of thermal imaging equipment to measure insulation levels in our housing stock. We've provided land at the Town Hall, Library and Civic Hall for community herb and vegetable gardens and a small community orchard, and have even persuaded ANSA to allow planting of heritage apple trees on the Wreck, and we are trying to establish more allotments. The Mad About Power Group, who produced the 2020 Transport Survey, are supporting the provision of electric vehicle charging points on Poole Bank, which will be described next. They are also monitoring pollution levels outside the schools on Albert Road right now to provide evidence for a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. Finally, the Plastics Group have been busy installing TerraCycle collection points in the schools so that crisp packets and other similar plastics can be easily recycled. We are also sharing our plans with other councils so that we have a critical mass of groups who are striving to gain future resilience. Could I have the next slide, please, David? Thank you. Now, we have developed a draft action plan which identifies key areas where work is needed. And this has been developed after talking with schools, transition groups and consulting action plans produced by other councils. Now, these key areas include, for example, community engagement, alternative energy, transport and health and well-being. What you see here is the waste and consumption area, and you can see that we have a number of sub-actions that we wish to undertake. And these are quite simple, ranging from a simple awareness campaign about recycling through to the formation of a repair cafe. Now, whilst many of these actions apply to Bollington, we actually don't know the community priorities and we don't know what we've missed. So because we don't know what we don't know, we have developed a questionnaire. Could I have the next slide, please, David? Thank you. Thank you. Which will give the community the opportunity to say what they think the priorities are for 2030, not for 2021, and let us know what we have missed. Now, the questionnaire will also ask how you feel your attitudes and values have been changed by the pandemic, because that clearly is going to change how people think, and we need to capture that information, not just for this group, but for several others. Now, we see here two sample questions that will be on this questionnaire. One is a very complex, high risk, high payoff. Should we form a community energy group? It will take time, but it could have extremely good benefits for Bollington. There is also, as you can see there, a low risk but high payoff environment, the formation of wildlife corridors. This is something that we can get our local schools to be involved with. Now, the BTC webpage is being redesigned, and once we have a dedicated Bollington 2030 page, the action plan and questionnaire will be published, questionnaire going live for people to fill in. Now, in addition to eliciting views from the community, the questionnaire will also invite members to join in a series of community events in which we'll be seeking answers to political or social problems by creating, enacting and discussing alternative narratives. We will be looking for members of the community with skills or enthusiasm, or indeed both, to help us deliver this vision. Now, I hope next year I will be able to show you how far we have come since this presentation. Now, at this point, I would now like to hand over to my colleague, John Weston, who will now talk about the EV charging points. And if you want to contact either myself or Transition Bollington, that's where you go. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
My name's Councillor John Weston. I've been working with Transition Bollington's Mad About Power group on the electric vehicle charging point project. Now, as I'm sure everyone knows, all new cars sold in the UK from 2030 onwards will be electric. This will cause some real problems for Bollington residents because, as you know, we have a large number of terrace cottages with no off-street parking. In fact, there are 1,355 terrace cottages, most of which don't have off-street parking. Normally, so the question here is, where are these people going to park there and charge their electric cars? The answer is that our car parks on our streets of terraced houses are going to need EVC charging points. So central, regional and local government need to find ways to put this infrastructure in place, and Bollington Town Council really wants to lead by example. Transition Bollington carried out a transport survey in October 2020, which confirmed that many residents wanted to switch to electric vehicles, but were put off by not having access to charging points at home. So we calculated that even on the most conservative assumption, we'll need at least 40 to 50 charging points by 2030. And that figure will increase exponentially after 2030. The next slide, please, David. So for now, we're hoping to install at least 4 to 6 electric vehicle charging points per annum for the next 10 years to try to get close to that target of 40 to 50 by 2030. The first phase is on Poolbank Car Park. If you remember, there was the recycling centre here on Poolbank Car Park. There's a picture of what it used to look like. And next slide, please, David. Yeah, and here's a picture of what it looks like now and where the EVC bays are going to go. So the old recycling bays have now been cleared. We've identified a power supply from the old automatic toilet block. We've received quotations and we've chosen our preferred supplier. So we're now finalising the details with Connected Curb, who are one of the largest electric vehicle charging point providers in the UK. So we've committed £5,000 of preset payers money, £2,000 of Section 106 developer money, and we've obtained a government grant of £15,000, which together will pay for the land transfer costs from Cheshire East, the electricity connection costs from Electricity North West, the civil engineering works from Jones Lighting, and the charging points, installation, etc. from Connected Curb themselves. Once the 4 bays are in operation, perhaps you could show the next slide, please, David. Once the 4 bays are in operation, we expect around 12 vehicles per week to charge up overnight. So generally, electric vehicles charge up over a couple of nights a week. So we're expecting 12 vehicles per week to charge up, plus other vehicles using the points for shorter term top-ups during the day. So the electricity costs for the users will be very competitive. They'll be similar to home charging rates and will be paid for by the drivers themselves using credit or prepaid methods of payment. By the way, the electricity that we're using is from sustainable sources, and so otherwise that would defeat the object. So the contract with Connected Curb includes insurances, ongoing maintenance and servicing, all at no further cost to the Bollington residents. We're hoping by this move to encourage Cheshire East to work with us to provide more on-street EVCs in the years ahead. This is really a practical example of how Bollington Town Council are working together with Transition Bollington. We're taking real positive action to reduce carbon emissions. We're not just talking about things, and to make our town a greener, cleaner and more sustainable place to live. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to write them in the box at the side and we'll try and answer them at the end. Or if you'd like to contact me through the Bollington Town Council website, please feel free to do so. Thank you for that. I'd now like to hand over to Councillor Mark Fern, who's now going to talk about safe and active travel. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Councillor John. Thank you very much. So good evening all. As you know, my name's Mark Fern. I'm a councillor for the East Ward. And tonight I'm going to give you a brief presentation about safe and active travel in Bollington. It's only one slide, so I'm going to talk you through most of it. From May onwards, I'm going to be working with the Transport and Highways group, which I'm really looking forward to. I believe the group is very enthusiastic, a mixture of public and town council members, which is really good, really good. I'm going to talk about a couple of projects that the group have been dealing with in the past, currently and going forward. So the group have been working on a scheme that the town council commissioned a few years ago called Reclaiming the Road. It's been designed by some specialist highways and town planning architects, and the design will form part of the basis for a consultation that will be going out to residents later in this year. What it basically is, we're looking at the main route through Bollington, the B5090, and 4 areas which we hopefully like to make into a bit like the Poynton, where you've got a shared space, driving space and resident space. So we're looking at doing that. The group have been meeting with the design team and working on the consultation. We also have a budget to work with the consultation team, which is really good and very positive. If it goes through, it's a very ambitious project and we really need the community behind it to help us with it or to agree with it. And we certainly do need some government funding once it's been agreed and to push it through. So it will be an expensive project, very ambitious, possibly over 4 phases. Again, that's to be agreed going forward. So I'm really looking forward to getting involved with that. So it's some exciting stuff going ahead. The group have also been working on some speed analysis throughout the town over the last few months or stroke year. And we've got some full support from Cheshire East Council in 20 is Plenty campaign. So the next phase now will be to work with the community to see where a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit would most benefit. So again, there'll be some consultation with the residents around Bollington with that. Moving forward, parking's obviously an issue in our town, and I'll give an example of Kerridge. Over the last year or so, we've had increased visitors to the area due to certain, obviously, the COVID situation, people working from home, so there's not as much parking available. We've had visitors parking irresponsibly, certainly in Kerridge, where we've had incidents of the bus not being able to get through on Oak Lane, and sometimes blocking access roads off, which isn't really good. We've also, Oak Lane is a particular pinch point where residents struggle to park with multiple cars there, multiple visitors coming into the area. So it's a problem for us up in Kerridge. I know it's the same in the rest of the town, but we're trying to do something in Kerridge to help ourselves. So the solutions we're looking at, we did look at permit parking and double yellow lines. Now, we don't believe they're going to work. It just pushes the problems elsewhere. So what we are looking at doing is encouraging visitors to not park outside the residents' houses, but they can park a bit further down on Jackson Lane. There's more parking spaces there. It's a wider road. It's safer. So we're looking at doing that. And to do that, we're working on some kind of polite signage. I'm working with the residents, a small residents group at the moment, where we're going to design a sign, and with the help of a local artist, to encourage people to possibly park further down on Jackson Lane, or possibly using the Hollin Hall. So I need to speak to Hollin Hall, which will encourage visitors to Hollin Hall, and hopefully they will encourage people to go to their facilities, use them, and we can use their car park, because there's quite a lot of parking space within Hollin Hall. So we've had a meeting already to discuss this. So I've got the residents working with me, which is really positive, and there's some positive feedback coming back from the local residents, which is I'm really excited about. In terms of active travel, so I've got an idea I've been thinking about over the last year or so. A lot of us use our cars to nip down to the co-op. I certainly do, not all the time, but most of the time. And I think we need to think about when we jump into our car, do we really need to? Could we walk rather than jump in the car? So I was thinking between half a mile and a mile, I mean, that's possible to walk. I did it today, actually. I went to the co-op today. It's exactly a mile. It took me 20 minutes. So half a mile would take you 10 minutes. So I think going forward, we need to encourage people to walk shorter distances and not use their cars. The benefits to this are obviously health benefits, benefits to the environment, and obviously it reduces the traffic flow through the town. So it's something I'd look forward to hopefully progressing with this with the residents. How would we encourage people to do this? So perhaps a health and wellbeing website on the BT, on our own town council's website to encourage that. An article in local magazines, and an agenda item on the highways and transport meetings to promote active travel throughout the town. So a few ideas I have moving forward. I'm really looking forward to working with the highways and transport group over the next year or two. And that's thank you for listening. That's it from me, and hopefully we'll get some questions at the end. Thank you very much. And I hand over to Sarah.
Thank you, Councillor Mark. So just waiting for the slides, David, if you have them, please. So I'm Sarah Knowles. I'm one of the town councillors for the Central Ward, and I'm going to be talking about the Emergency Resilience Plan. We've already heard quite a bit already about resilience in the community, and particularly with regard to our vision for 2030, which Councillor Rowland spoke about. Resilience really is something which is integral to our community, and certainly when we're talking about emergency resilience, it's often the community who are best placed to mobilise that first response. So sometimes things do take us by surprise, and so it's really important that we have a plan in place to help us look at the risks that might occur in the community and how we might respond to them. So let's have a look at resilience first, because it has several forms. So we have social resilience. I think we have plenty of this already in Bollington with regard to how we have like good social networks, we have cultural networks, there's plenty of examples of inclusion and people working together and socialising together. We have aspects of economic resilience with regard to how businesses respond, and we've certainly seen lots of examples of how businesses have changed their strategies in order to respond to the pandemic, for example. We have infrastructural resilience that we always need to be mindful of and think about how we can improve that. And the environmental resilience that Roland's already addressed as well. Certainly the sustainability aspect of that is an important part of building a resilient community. So resilience is really all about how we recover from difficulties, and it can be associated with toughness, positivity, confidence, persistence, keeping our composure under pressure, collaborating and having a vision. But ultimately, our resilience with regard to responding to emergencies is always going to be stronger if we have planning. So we have put a lot of thought into what happens when we're faced with various emergency scenarios. Next slide, please, David. So here are some of the common scenarios. Some of them we're already very familiar with. So natural disasters, including flooding. So obviously we had a big flood event not so long ago in July 2019, and we had another flood alert not so long ago in the end of January, I think it was, early February. And there's also the possibility of having the opposite effect. Sometimes we are affected by drought, and that can bring about wildfires in our moors and hills. And other examples of extreme weather may come about due to things that we can't control, that are more perhaps global issues such as volcanic eruptions. There may be local seismic or earthquake activity, landslides and so on, and poor air quality that can be caused by natural or human factors. So those are some of the natural disasters that that we've planned for and done risk assessments for. There's also disease. So clearly we're all familiar now with what happens during a pandemic, and that we need to mobilise a plan to respond to that. And you'll already be familiar with much of the work that's gone on and been coordinated by the council to, for example, put in place a network of volunteers. So each street has a street warden, and we put in this quite robust response system to ensure that nobody should be isolated or unable to get help and support from within the community. There are also instances, of course, of when animal disease may threaten our local livestock and perhaps even our own pets. So we've got plans in place for that as well. Other scenarios that may come about include things like major accidents. So, for example, being under the Manchester Airport flight path may pose a threat, and also malicious attacks which may come about as a result of terrorism, for example. So those are just some of the things that we've addressed in the emergency plan. If you could do the next slide, please. Thank you, David. So in terms of how you can get involved as a community, so as I mentioned right at the start, it is the community who are often the best place to mobilise that first response. So if you think back to the flooding in July 2019, it was the community who were able to help each other in that situation. We saw lots of examples of people being very resourceful to help and support each other and help to improve the situation before the emergency services could get here. So things that you might want to think about doing are whether you can provide a resource. So we've got within the plan a list of people who can provide a resource. Now this might be something like having a 4x4 vehicle that can get to isolated places or places where there's flooding. It might be having a chainsaw that can help to chop down trees that have fallen over roads. That kind of thing, or some kind of skill that you have that would help in an emergency situation. You may even have emergency planning skills from your career or other experience. You could also be a volunteer. So we already have a really strong volunteer network that we're really proud of, and there's always opportunity for people to join that and be part of that first response volunteer group. If you lead a local organisation, I'm thinking about the Bridgend Centre, obviously, is a very well-known one, and the community centre and various youth organisations, then you might want to think about how you could volunteer or provide a service or support during an emergency, and let us know about that. Within the plan as well, we've also identified rest centres. So a rest centre is typically somewhere where people would go to have a safe haven for the first 24 hours during an emergency where you might have to be evacuated. So if you think back to July 19, when Whaley Bridge had to be evacuated, that was the situation they were faced with. All those evacuees had to go somewhere and went to designated rest centres until they could be moved to B&B accommodation or alternative accommodation. So we've identified St Gregory's School and the community centre at Bollington Cross and the civic centre as 3 rest centres. But if you have any other ideas of places that could be used in the area, we're kind of lacking somewhere to the north end of the town towards Potch Wrigley, that side of town, as a rest centre. So if you've got any ideas there, that would be great. And please do have a look at the plan when it's published. We will be publishing it soon. It's just going through a final phase of redrafting, and it will be on the Town Council website. And I think it's going to be really useful for as many people as possible in the town to be familiar with that. So if you would like to go to the last slide, please, David. So if you do have any questions about the emergency resilience plan, please do raise them here. We'll try to answer them. And obviously do get in touch with me via the Town Council website. You'll find our contact details on the councillors page there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think it's me now. It's hard to believe that it's almost a year since the Prime Minister asked us all to protect our vulnerable members of the society. We actually held our town assembly in person. It's incredible to believe, actually, but here we are doing our meeting online this year. So on the 23rd of March, we were all in lockdown. We were staying at home. We were participating in our once a day exercise and wondering what lay ahead. Bollington Town Council did have some shielding councillors from early in March, but a remaining handful met at the town hall, all spread out round the chambers, and agreed that we didn't really know what Bollington would need, but we did agree that we had to do everything we could to put special measures in place to help the town manage through the pandemic. We really were feeling our way through it, but we were determined to do something. Next slide, thank you, David. So we got to it. We started working out what was needed. We looked at what other councils were doing around the country as well. And within a week, we had set up a dedicated email address. We had a dedicated phone number with a recorded message gathering people's messages. And we had all the information and also as much information on the pandemic itself that we knew at that point, printed on a flyer and delivered to every house in the town. We set up a small working group, which was aimed at completely managing the process. We met daily to begin with, electronically on Microsoft Teams, then every few days, then weekly, and it gradually moved to every other week and then monthly. And we still keep in touch and report back to the Community Services Environment Committee on a regular basis. We had 281 volunteers registered to help. Every single one of those was personally briefed on how to keep themselves safe and to keep residents safe and what sort of tasks they might be expected to undertake for their residents. We also had those volunteers forming into small groups. We encouraged them to set up as street wardens with WhatsApp groups or other little groups to communicate with their immediate neighbourhood. We had 97 vulnerable residents who were all they either called or emailed for help, and they were directed to their nearest volunteer. that initial rush of help requests actually included some vulnerable residents who needed emergency supplies, who were running out of food, who had prescriptions that needed picking up, and we actually were providing a matching service in the early few days, and actually the councillors themselves were also on hand, going and collecting prescriptions, and it was definitely all hands to the pump in those very early weeks. Next slide, thank you. Oh, actually, I was going to say one more thing actually on that, but it's fine to move on. One of the other things that we set up was a befriending service with the Bridgend Centre. Bridgend Centre itself was obviously closed, but we were able to utilise their expertise and set up a telephone befriending service so that anybody on our vulnerable list who was isolated and lonely, we could actually match them to a volunteer that was able to make a regular phone call. And to be honest, that was another example of us working in partnership with the other charities and also the Middlewood Partnership on highlighting individuals who needed help that may have slipped through the net otherwise. Thank you. Next slide, David. So where are we now? Where do we go from here? We have kept in touch with all of the volunteers. We send out relatively regular communications to make sure that people are still aware of the latest information, latest restrictions, and to remind volunteers on what sort of things might be required of them. It has been truly amazing witnessing what we have achieved as a town, and I mean the people of Bollington, those that stepped up and said they would help, those that dropped everything. It has been just absolutely incredible, to be honest. I don't think any of us foresaw what this year was going to be like, but we did, as a town, rise to that challenge. There is no intention to close down the support line or the email address. They continue to be monitored for any new requests for help. That does still happen from time to time, actually. And where do we go from here? Well, we hope to retain the network of volunteers by keeping in touch with them. This exercise was a live exercise in emergency resilience that Councillor Sarah has just spoken to you all about, and making sure that we know how to be in touch with our volunteers is very important, really, in terms of that emergency resilience. And really, it only remains for me to just thank every single one of our town who have shown incredible community spirit through absolutely unprecedented times, and I think everybody should be very, very proud of that effort. Thank you very much. I'm now handing over to Councillor James, I think.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Joe. My name is James Nicholas, and I'm a councillor for West Ward. Do I need to wait for the slides to come up, or? No, okay. At the Town Assembly last year, we suggested planting some bulbs around Bollington, and this seemed to get a very encouraging response. So last October, we planted a total of 22,000 daffodils in 5 areas along the main road through Bollington. Those areas are the junction at Princess Drive and Bollington Road, just on the grass there. An area around the Millennium Cross area, Oven House Lane Junction, and a strip along Henshaw Road near Southwest Avenue, and finally outside of Shrigley Court. So I was hoping that they might have been in full bloom by now, but alas, that wasn't to be. But hopefully in the next few weeks, or the next few days, hopefully we'll be able to see 22,000 daffodils in all their glory. So the next thing we're going to do over the next few weeks, we've placed an order to have 6 planters, each which will be 1.2 metres long, with a mixture of flowers, as well as be utilising 2 1 metre square planters. So all these will have flowers in, and these are going to be placed along the railings overlooking the wreck, nearly opposite the Civic Hall. And again, that should start to happen in the next few weeks or so. So now we have a further sum of money available for the next financial year. So if anybody would like to make any suggestions, I would be very happy to hear them. So my piece is very quick, but I just finally just like to say a big thank you to Andrea for all her hard work in helping make this happen. Thank you very much.
I'd like to present Jackie Weaver now to talk about becoming a town councillor. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, first of all, it's been a pleasure to listen to the first of all the achievements of Bollington Town Council. Clearly, Bollington always was and remains a forward-looking council, but also a council that clearly engages well with its community. And I was particularly struck by Councillor Maitland's presentation on how Bollington and its community had come together during COVID. Yes, Jackie Weaver, I'm the Chief Officer of the Cheshire Association of Local Councils, and my job really is to provide advice and guidance to our town and parish councils. So it's a pleasure to spend some time with you this evening. Next slide, please. Many of you, of course, are town councillors here this evening, and I guess you don't really need a refresher from me as to what it's all about. But what is a town councillor to those of you who are not currently involved? Well, I think you'll have seen from the presentations that we've had this evening that the primary purpose of a town councillor perhaps is to be interested in your community and want to make a difference in your community. There are a raft of legislations, policies and procedures, of course, that councils themselves have to deal with. And of course, the council has been well supported over the years by its outgoing clerk, David Naylor. And in many ways, David and the staff team's role is to ensure that councillors are able to navigate the surrounding legislation, the surrounding infrastructure. So really, being a town councillor is mainly about bringing that passion for your community into play. Question: what if I don't do politics? If you remember on the television a little while ago, there was a advertisement to encourage us all to get involved in local politics at some level. And it was trying to get over that really everything is politics. And in a way, it's about recognising that politics is more than party politics. Politics is about wanting to be involved in local democracy and wanting, again, to be involved in improving the lot of your community and its environment. Topical question at the moment: is this man's work? Well, I would argue very much that it is definitely man's work, but it is also women's work, and it is also young people's work, and it's also about encouraging as much diversity into our councils as we can. A really effective council is enhanced when it is truly representative of its community. And in order to do that, mindful of what we've heard this evening about the diversity push the council is making, so part of that will be about trying to encourage a greater diversity among the people who come forward to stand as town councillors. What will be expected of you? In many ways, what's expected of you is as much as you are able to put in. Bollington, as you've heard, is a council that is passionate about its community and passionate about its environment. And I guess if you're not someone who doesn't like rolling up their sleeves and getting involved, it may be the role of town councillor in Bollington is not for you. But that still leaves many other ways that you could get involved with the work of Bollington without actually being a councillor exactly. So there is an expectation, in my opinion, that as a town councillor for Bollington, there'll be an expectation that you roll up those sleeves and you bring energy and enthusiasm to the council in terms of, again, delivering for the community of Bollington. And what can you expect in return? Well, I think you've seen this evening, part of what you can expect in return is to be part of an enthusiastic and active team that has a vision for the community. You will also have the practical support, as I say, of officers and someone there who will show you the ropes, as it were. So again, it's about your passion for your community and the area you live in, and not necessarily having to worry too much about how it happens behind the scenes. There is always help for that. So if you decided that you do want to be a town councillor in Bollington, how does the magic happen? Next slide, please, David. Well, at the moment, Bollington has 2 vacancies, one in the central and one in the east wards. And the slide here tells you the dates that will be important, and I'll read them to you if you want. The central ward, that vacancy arose last October and will be filled by election on May the 6th. The east ward, the vacancy occurred this February, and we are yet to find out if that will actually go to election or not. If 10 electors from the west ward request one, then there will be an election, which will be held at the same time as the central ward election, and if not, that seat can be filled by co-option. All details and forms for the process are available on the Town Council website and notice boards. Next slide, please. Here we simply see a map of the relevant wards, and again, if you wish to stand as a councillor for the forthcoming election or potentially for the co-option, then I would suggest that you contact the Town Council directly, and there you will get some help with any information you need about eligibility and also about filling in the actual forms. Next slide. Okay, I'm mindful that I don't want to take up too much of your time this evening. The process of standing for election, whether it be by proper election or by co-option, is quite straightforward. And as I said before, there is plenty of time, there's plenty of assistance available if you need it. But the thing that I would like to leave you with is kind of like the theme of the evening, which is, if you are passionate about Bollington and you really want to see a difference made in your community, you could probably do a lot worse than stand as a councillor for Bollington Town Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie.